Welcome to Next Level Play Therapy, a weekly podcast dedicated to supporting the next generation of child and adolescent therapists to provide exceptional play therapy services. We'll explore all things play therapy to elevate your work with children and adolescents using the therapeutic powers of play. I'll discuss practical tips and ideas so you can provide a transformative experience for your young clients and make a real difference in their lives. So get ready to take your play therapy skills to the next level and make a lasting impact in the lives of children, adolescents, and families. Hey there, welcome to this week's episode of Next Level Play Therapy, where we talk about all things play therapy. And this week I want to tackle a topic that I find comes up a lot because the natural default in the mental health field is individual counseling. I kind of feel like that's because in university, the main focus of that is usually clinical work with adults. And so from an adult standpoint, most people just meet individually with the adults. Unless you're a marriage and family therapist person, then you're probably just by default conceptualizing that adult within their marital relationship and possibly within their family relationships. Quite possibly that intergenerational impact of attachment and attachment relationships and family dynamics and all of the things. I would say for the most part, though, most people conceptualize counseling from an individual lens. When you're working with children, that's still the same model that we use. Most of the training that we get is focused on individual play therapy. And so today, well, let me finish that thought. So most of the focus, even in our training, is focused on individual counseling. And yet children are dependent on parents for staying alive, basically, for food, shelter, clothing, protection, caring for, I would say, nurturing and love as well to build resiliency. And those family dynamics, I think it's important to look at relationships with siblings as well. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Which is better? Is one better than the other? Because what I find happens is a lot of people in the play therapy world don't really conceptualize what treatment would look like if there was more than just the child in the session, or they add the parents, but they're still using an individual therapy mindset. So is it really family play therapy, or did you just add the parents in there and you're not really shifting your theoretical foundation a bit? So that's what I want to talk about today. Is individual therapy better than family play therapy? And so I want to do a pros and cons. And what I would like to do is, if you're watching live, or maybe you're watching the replay, or maybe you're listening on the podcast, I'm thinking this might be useful for you to kind of workshop this a little bit. And what I mean by that is, if you're in a place where you can write or do a little journaling, then grab your paper and pencil or whatever it is, or marker and crayons, because we're play therapists. I like to use colored pens. Just makes it more fun. Anyway, so and what I would say is, maybe think about, as we go through the pros and cons today, maybe write those down for you. What are the pros and cons, and how are you conceptualizing your work with children and adolescents using play therapy? So let's get started for today. So today's focus is individual play therapy better than family play therapy? So if you're watching live, I would love to know who's here. Post in the comments, say hello, join the conversation. Feel free to add pros and cons from your point of view. And just, I feel like more of our heads are better than my one head. That's usually what I say when it comes to consultation. So feel free to join the conversation today. If you're listening on the replay, honestly, feel free to post your name in the comments. I would still love to connect. Post your thoughts, pros and cons, questions. And if you're listening on the podcast, feel free to pop over to my Instagram channel, which is at Renewing Hearts Training. Send me a message, post on the comments, because I do live stream simultaneously with using StreamYard on LinkedIn and YouTube, but I'll also live stream on Instagram, which is why you kind of see me looking back and forth between two cameras. So feel free to add to the conversation in Instagram. Pop over on my Instagram channel if you're listening to the podcast, which is Next Level Play Therapy, or send me a message. I would love to have a conversation. Alrighty, so let's get started. First, what are the benefits of individual play therapy? So if you're listening, write down some things that you think are the benefits of individual play therapy. I'm going to go through some myself, and you feel free to add to these. So typically, the benefit is that you get individualized focus on the child to help them overcome their difficulties. You provide that free and protected space for the child to have an opportunity to work through, using play therapy, whatever it is that's going on in their life that's causing them to be distressed. I would say that's probably the main reason, number one reason for using individual play therapy session. The other thing is, more on a practical level, using individual play therapy is easier to manage because you only have to deal with one person, so to speak, and it's a child, and they usually love being in there. Not always, but every once in a while there are those ones that aren't. But most of the time, I would say most kids and adolescents would prefer having that individual. Sometimes not, though. Sometimes I find that isn't the case and they want family members in there. But I would say for the most part, kids like having that opportunity where they can say what they want, do almost anything they want to do. And if there's anything they can't do, you'll let them know. That's my child-centered play therapy there. And it's easier to manage because you only have one person in the room, and they're a child, so they usually like being in there, and you don't usually have too much resistance. Sometimes you do, though. And then, so here's the thing. How many times have you heard, I'm going to try to say this in a way that doesn't sound judgmental, because I don't mean it that way, but we all say it. And I hear it a lot. Not everybody says it, and I hear it a lot. And so I just want to have an honest conversation about play therapy and individual versus family play therapy. I actually heard this a few weeks ago just from a colleague. when I was talking about play therapy and working with children. And I hear this so many times. And that is, I don't know if you guys might be able to guess it by now. That is, I like working with kids. I don't like working with parents. And so a lot of times, child and adolescent therapists, or not necessarily play therapists, but play therapists say this too. I think a lot of times that's coming from a place of not really knowing how to engage parents, and maybe being intimidated by parents because you feel like they're judging you, and you feel like you have to prove that you're doing a good job. I've talked about this in other podcast episodes and other YouTube, other live stream episodes. So if you're watching on YouTube, you may want to pop back through some of the replays. There's a ton on my YouTube channel, which is Cathi Spooner, Renewing Hearts. And if you click on the live tab, you'll see where all the replays are. But I think this has a lot to do with imposter syndrome, that you feel like you can easily connect with the children, but you feel like you have to prove your worth or prove that play therapy is working. And we put a lot of pressure on ourselves, but sometimes parents have some things that they're struggling with, and they can be operating from a place of being overwhelmed, scared, and feeling like you're judging them. If we're going to use a little IFS language, maybe would say their firefighters got activated, or maybe you're having to interact with their protectors and it's creating some challenges. I think as play therapy, and I'll talk about this in some of the benefits of family play therapy, but I think when it comes to working with parents and family members, I think a lot of times, because play therapists have only been trained to use individual play therapy, I think the thought of having more people in the session can feel really intimidating and overwhelming. And to some extent, I think that concern is really valid, in the sense of you really need to have training specific to how to do it. Otherwise, it doesn't always go so well. And even when you have training and you have a framework, it can be challenging sometimes. So I think what happens is, one of the benefits of individual play therapy for play therapists is because they don't really feel comfortable working with parents, or they don't really know how to integrate parents in there, then the benefit would be, then you don't have to be out of your comfort zone. I feel like that could be a pro or a con, a benefit or a drawback, but I'm going to put it there as my transition to the drawbacks. So some of the drawbacks of individual play therapy would be, so again, right, if you're kind of watching, we're kind of workshopping this a little bit, pros and cons, because this really comes down to your clinical decision-making process. You are conceptualizing what is going on with your clients. So what are the roots of the problem? It's going to be influenced by your play therapy theoretical framework to make sense of what's going on. And then your play therapy framework is going to influence what you do. How do you address it? And so what we're doing is we're going through the pros and cons, the benefits and drawbacks of individual play therapy versus family play therapy, so you can kind of figure out what would make the most sense clinically for your client to help them make the progress that they need to make. And so some of the drawbacks then, some things to think about for the drawbacks for individual play therapy would be that you really aren't able to observe in real time what are the interaction patterns going on for your client within their family system. You don't know if some of maybe the dynamic between parent and child, or maybe the dynamics within the family system, you don't know how much of those are actually clinically contributing to the problem the child is experiencing if you don't really see it, because you're having to rely on what parents understand and how parents are trying to make sense of it and their observations. They don't know. They don't always know. Sometimes they know. I've met with some really insightful parents who are definitely attuned with their kids and they're really good sources of information. And then other parents who struggle with that. And here's the other thing: who of us really fully understands what's going on, right? That's why we go to counseling, to get some feedback and support from somebody, because we can't see everything, or it'll take longer. Or, sometimes we're having conversations with family members. I can't tell you how many times this has happened to me. In my family, we're kind of working through an issue and I think I'm right about it, only to find out through having a conversation, there's a whole other different way of looking at it. And I have to stop and think for a moment, like, oh, okay. Right. So how many of us really fully understand? So that's one of the drawbacks, is you don't really get to see for yourself from a neutral place, observing the interactions and that are going on, to make sense of what are the strengths as well as maybe some of the challenges that family members are facing. So that's one thing you want to think about if you're deciding individual versus family. The other drawback is you're only going to meet with the child hopefully once a week. Sometimes I know play therapists or child and adolescent therapists will meet with the child every other week. That every other week, in my opinion, is not ideal. It takes longer. It slows the process down. Sometimes it's the least worst option. Ideally, individual therapy sessions are going to optimize the progress that you can make with children. So you're meeting with the kids once a week, ideally, and then you're meeting with parents whenever you're able to get them scheduled, or maybe you're not even meeting with parents. The thing about individual play therapy is what ends up happening, you're having to schedule an extra session in your calendar, and maybe your calendar's full. I don't find that one's too big of a deal. However, it is, especially in some settings where you have to have really high. I've heard some caseload sizes when they're working with kids, and I'm thinking, well, I usually say it outside my head, but I'm like, oh my gosh, that is going to be hard to manage. That's like an individual adult therapist caseload. That's not really a child and adolescent therapist caseload. That's a whole other topic for discussion. But having another session to schedule with parents can create some challenges. The other drawback is, because parents aren't in the session and you meet with them periodically, maybe, or you just do the 5-minute, air quotes, 5-minute check-in at the end of the session, or maybe at the beginning. It's never 5 minutes, and it's usually in front of the child. You end up getting a lot of phone calls, texts, and emails about not your whole caseload, but you usually have those ones that are struggling, a handful enough that you're getting a bunch of phone calls, texts and emails in between the therapy sessions telling you all the things that are going wrong and why things aren't working. So you're spending a lot of time responding to those. So that can be some of the drawbacks of doing individual only play therapy sessions. So what are the benefits then of doing family play therapy sessions? So to me, one of the biggest benefit of using family play therapy is that you are able to see in real time what are the dynamics going on. And then based on your training and experience and your knowledge, you can assess what those dynamics are. You can assess the strengths of the family. You can assess where they're struggling, and that might be where you want to focus on facilitating change while you're also reinforcing those strengths. But you can see in real time, and you don't have to rely on secondhand information. You've got that information to add it to, excuse me, your case conceptualization to get a sense of what's going on, excuse me, what's going on for your client that's contributing to the problem, and what are the patterns that are sustaining it in the sessions. And then the other thing is you can help parents in the sessions in real time use some attachment-based parenting strategies in the session that they can practice with you, with your support in the session where you're modeling and they're practicing, and then you're giving feedback about what's going well and some ideas for what to do. And then they can take that information and practice it outside of the session in the child's everyday life. They can take what is happening in the sessions, parents, and implement that in the day-to-day living. What do you think is going to have more impact? Once a week, or having the parent be able to apply every single day throughout the day? And who is it that's going to be around after their child is not coming to play therapy anymore? Parents and family members. You're not going to be there. They're going to be there. So what the benefit of family play therapy is that you are helping family members in real time to create new ways of doing things, and you're strengthening the things that are really going well for them, and they can use that in their everyday life long after they're not working with you anymore. I always say you have the ability, when you're using family play therapy, to create generational shifts. I see this happen all the time when I'm working with families that have generational histories of trauma, attachment issues, poverty, all the things. And you have a parent who desperately wants to change the cycle, and they're so motivated and they are working hard to overcome. Or maybe you have a parent and they don't even know that is what's going on, and you build that rapport with them and help them understand, and now they really want to be part of the change process. You're shifting. You are helping to shift. When you integrate parents, and I would even say siblings, into the sessions, you are shifting whole family systems, changing generational patterns that have long-lasting impact. That's huge, in my opinion. And parents are the ones who are going to be around. So the benefit of family play therapy is that you get to support parents to be that therapeutic agent of change for their child and create long-lasting change, because they are actually in the session doing the work with you. To me, that's one of the biggest benefits. Those two things are the biggest benefits. So what are some of the drawbacks of family play therapy? Some of the drawbacks are that there's a lot of people in the session sometimes to manage, and it can be scary, and it can be overwhelming, and it can be terrifying, which explains when in Play Therapy Academy and Play Therapy Elevation Circle are my two consultation memberships. Are a little bit different. Play Therapy Academy is my online consultation program typically for people who are pursuing their RPT credential, but not everybody in Play Therapy Academy is pursuing their RPT credential. What they really want is a lot of hands-on support. So we meet twice a month. We staff cases every time. There's a whole schedule of when you're presenting and what you're going to be, like the format for your presentation, so that we can get down into providing support. And Elevation Circle is, we do consultation as well. We do a book club, but it's really focused on connecting play therapists with each other and getting support, as well as doing the consultation and the book club to increase knowledge and skills as well. It's just a different focus, and it doesn't meet the our RPT credential requirements for the Association for Play Therapy. That would be Play Therapy Academy. But one of the things that we talk about all the time is how overwhelming it is. Because usually when I suggest to people who are new to me, hey, that would be good to a family play therapy session, usually the look on their face is, what? That sounds scary and overwhelming. And it does have the potential to be scary and overwhelming, because there are a lot of different personalities in there. What do you do if somebody has a tantrum? How do you handle that? Because fundamentally, your theoretical mindset is much different than individual play therapy. So family play therapy and attachment-focused family play therapy is a theoretical foundational shift in the way in which you're conceptualizing what's going on, why it's happening, and what are you going to do. And in a family play therapy session, you can have, like I've had the whole family in there. And that you can have a lot of different personalities in there that you're managing, and you're having to figure out therapeutically, what is that going to look like in terms of what are we going to be doing, and the interventions, and my role and parents' role, all of those things. The other drawback is sometimes parents aren't able to be in the sessions. Sometimes you're working with children from a divorced family system, and maybe they have contact with one parent and they don't have contact with another parent. Or maybe there's a parent who struggles with addiction, or maybe there are children in foster care and they're not able to have their parents participate for a variety of reasons. You can have foster care parents participate if it's something that the foster care worker is agreeing to, because they're the legal guardian typically, and they know what needs to be accomplished from a reunification standpoint. So you really work pretty closely, I think, with foster care workers, so that you're working towards the same goal. But maybe there's a history of abuse or trauma, and it's not safe yet. Doesn't mean it won't ever be safe. Sometimes it won't, but sometimes there's a whole healing process that can take place. and maybe it's not time for that person to be in the session, or maybe they're not able to be in the session. Maybe they're in jail. So that might be, you may not include some of these people, or it might be a drawback. Some of these things might be drawbacks for using family play therapy. There's a lot of different temperaments that you have to manage, and possibly, most likely, typically, different developmental stages and abilities. So you're having to figure out what you're going to do about that. So these are some of the things that you need to think about. And I would say one of the drawbacks would be, if you don't have a strategic family play therapy model that you're using, then it probably isn't going to go well. You really need to be trained to use a family play therapy model, either like an attachment based, where you're using parent child in the session together, or maybe a family play therapy model that you're using. Because fundamentally, it's a shift in your clinical mindset about roles and responsibilities. So you really want to be trained to use a specific model. So can the answer be both? Can you do both? I would say yes. I typically use both. I typically will start off with individual play therapy and meeting with the parents separately in the beginning. That gives me a chance to get a better sense of what's going on. I tell parents, though, from the beginning, from that very first phone call where they contact me, and from that diagnostic intake appointment, I tell them at some point, we are most likely going to be using a family play therapy approach, and we'll figure out what that's going to look like. I tell them from the get-go that they are active participants, that they are critical to the success of the treatment outcomes. They're important. I say all of that from the very beginning. So I set the stage, and then I will explain how play therapy is going to work in the way that I do it. So there you go. So those are the pros and cons, so to speak, of individual versus family play therapy, the benefits and drawbacks of both. I think it's really important for you to think about some of these things when you are making decisions about the treatment approach. What are you going to be doing in sessions, and what is play therapy actually going to look like in the way in which you provide play therapy? So let's do a quick recap. We are looking at, is the topic for today is individual play therapy better than family play therapy? There are benefits and drawbacks to both individual play therapy and family play therapy. And it's important for you to use your clinical decision making based on the theoretical model that you're using, and you've had training. And I would say consultation and peer support is what takes that training information to know how to apply it. I feel like it's hard for us to do this alone, and theory alone does not get the successful outcomes that we need. We've got to be able to apply it, and then how do you apply it is where the rubber hits the road. And so that's where I feel like we support, which is why I created Elevation Circle and Play Therapy Academy. Plus I do trainings as well. And I'm going to talk a little bit about some trainings that I have coming up if you're interested and you would like some more training. I do think it's important to figure out what you're going to be doing, using the pros and cons and what makes the most sense for your client, each specific client, based on your case conceptualization. of what's going on and why is it happening and what patterns are supporting it. And then also, I think we can use both. I think I think it's possible. I think some people really prefer using family play therapy right from the beginning. I don't think a lot of people are doing that. I think most people are just most play therapists and child and adolescent therapists are just using individual play therapy and then kind of adding the parent in here and there. I find using both to be very beneficial. Like I usually start out with individual play therapy and then working separately with the parent. That way I'm building rapport with both of them and getting a sense, building trust and getting a sense of what's going on and where we need to focus and what we need to do, because case conceptualization is ongoing, where we have our initial case conceptualization and then we adjust as we go through the treatment process. So I think adding family play therapy into the treatment process is a game changer. I use it all the time. So that is it for today. Oh, sorry, I forgot my last point, which is if you're going to be using family play therapy, then I really think it's important to get trained in a family play therapy model, because family play therapy is not individual play therapy plus one or plus two. It's not using an individual play therapy model and then just kind of adding parents in there. I mean, you can do that if you're just bringing parents in for parent coaching so that they, like maybe the last 15 minutes of the session just to go over, here's what we did today, here are the skills, here's what, that's going to look like practicing, here's how parents can help, that kind of thing. But if you want to make a fundamental shift within the family system that's going to promote long-term resiliency and positive treatment outcomes for your client, then thinking about them systemically within the context of the most important relationships they have, which is their family, then I think family play therapy can be a game changer. You need to be trained in it, though, because there are some fundamental shifts for that. Which brings me to, if you're interested in getting some training, I do have a training coming up on my attachment-focused family play therapy model that's coming up in November. So in this, I'm really gonna go over kind of the neuroscience and attachment focus of thinking about the child from that lens and what that looks like from a family systems point of what are you doing in the sessions? How are you conceptualizing and thinking about it? So that, and then what are the stages? What's your role? That's really important to know. What is your role? It's going to be a little different than in individual play therapy sessions. Your role and parents' role are a little different in family play therapy sessions. So I'll go over the roles and what that looks like in each stage of the attachment-focused family play therapy model. And then how are you choosing your interventions? Because that's usually what moves the needle for play therapists to figure out, how do I do this and how do I do it effectively and how do I do it in a way that really makes a difference for my clients to get the healing that they're looking for. And so that's the training that I have coming up on Saturday, November 8th. You can do it in person or virtual. There's two options available. So if you want to take a visit to beautiful St. George, Utah, or maybe you're in the area and maybe you need some in-person play therapy training hours, then I would highly recommend this would be a training that would help you move the needle in that way. If you want to take it virtually, there is a virtual training option. So you're going to want to hop over to my website at rhplaytherapytraining.com, click on the training page, and then you'll see attachment focused family play therapy, and then you'll pick which option if you want the in-person or if you want the virtual option. I also have an in-person Santre training coming up in December, which that is using a neuroscience and attachment lens using a neuroscience and attachment lens with Santre in play therapy. My mouth is not working right now. Using a neuroscience and attachment lens with Santre in play therapy. That's a 2-day, really immersive, very small. I do a maximum of 12. That's for me, that's like that most. Usually it's like 8 to 10, but I'll take up to 12 max. We do a lot of making Santres and processing Santres and learning what to look for, using a neuroscience and attachment lens. What does that look like to explore those implicit experiences and use the Santre process to facilitate some changes in that way. That one's really small. It's in person only. I like, when I do Santre trainings, I like having people get their hands in the sand. The sensory experience and is so powerful that I like play therapists to experience that for themselves. So if you're interested in that training, you have plenty of time to make those plane reservations and hotel reservations, or if you're local, to sign up. Space is very, very limited for that one. And then for those of you who are looking for support, I actually have openings. I have right now I have one opening. I might have 2 openings in Play Therapy Academy. That's my hands-on consultation program. So if you're interested in that one, then hop over to my website at rhplaytherapytraining.com. Go on the consultation page for Play Therapy Academy. If you're interested in Elevation Circle, enrollment isn't open just yet. It's going to be opening up. So if you want to get on the wait list for that, then pop over to my website. There's tons of stuff over there. And I will see you next time. Oh, I forgot. We're putting all of these links in the comments. Feel free to reach out to me and send me a message if you have questions. Alrighty. See you next week. Bye for now. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Next Level Play Therapy. I hope you found the discussion valuable and gained new insights and ideas to support your work helping children, adolescents, and families heal. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave a review. Your feedback helps to improve and reach more people who can benefit from this information. Remember, play therapy is a powerful tool for healing and growth. Whether you're a new play therapist or experienced, I encourage you to continue your learning journey to unlock the potential of play in your own work and relationships. If you have any questions or topic suggestions for future episodes, I'd love to hear from you. Connect with me on social media and visit my website at Renewing Hearts Play Therapy Training to stay updated on upcoming episodes, trainings, and resources. Thank you once again for listening to Next Level Play Therapy. Until next time, keep playing, learning, and growing.